Once in a while, I record a video that I think is so deeply offensive to my audience that I'm really not sure if I'm going to end up sharing it with the public, uploading it, when I start speaking to the camera. Life is unfair. Life is unequal. In many videos in the past, I've emphasized that when we're dealing with the shallow, skin-deep world of beauty, weight loss, diets, fashion, acting, going to auditions as an actor, we're dealing with a part of life on Earth that is maybe especially unfair, that's maybe especially judgmental about things that none of us have the power to change. I wish I could tell you that when we get into the life of the mind or the life of the spirit, that life becomes more equal. Certainly when I was a child, that was a delusion that was very precious to me. I wanted to believe that in terms of intelligence, we were all born equal. That related to things I was taught in school, that related to things I was taught by television. And going through, a government school system, it's a very convenient sort of myth to live by. One of the very few concepts I can say I inherited from my father that was really wise and useful is the concept of attitudinal learning. We don't just learn facts, we learn attitudes. Where I differ from my father is the emphasis I place on the way in which attitudes tend to prevent us and preclude us from learning new facts, from having new experiences in life. I was just looking at yet another channel from yet another person who went to Chiang Mai, Thailand, and went to Laos, went to places that have been a big part of my life. And this person is still living with the delusion that what the internet needs is yet another video titled "What I Eat in a Day in Chiang Mai, Thailand, High Carb, Low Fat, Vegan," etc. As if the question of what a high carb, low fat vegan would eat in Chiang Mai, Thailand is a mystery that nobody knows the answer to, and that all of us on the internet are waiting for this information. This is the most over-publicized, over-documented question ever to be answered on the internet. And how many people were ever interested in the answer to that question in the first place? It can't be that many. So it's a niche market within a niche market that's oversaturated. But that's not what this video is about. I really wish I were jejune enough to make a video right now saying that this person who's on permanent vacation in Thailand, I think more than a year-long vacation in this case, I wish I could say, if only this person would enroll in language classes, learning the Thai language or learning the Lao language or Cambodian or something, or Hmong, many different languages, or Burmese, Shan. If only this person enrolled in a language course. If only this person volunteered to do humanitarian work, they would have a much more meaningful experience in Thailand and this part of Asia. But the reality is, if you're on the ground and you meet the people who do that, the vast majority of people who enroll in language classes do not have any kind of meaningful experience or any kind of meaningful engagement. They don't learn anything from it. The vast majority of people who do humanitarian work, especially when that humanitarian work is directly linked to a vacation, basically holiday humanitarian work, learn nothing from the experience, etc., etc. The shallowness that people bring to those opportunities tends to totally preclude any possibility of learning something or having a transformative experience or just gaining new information, asking worthwhile questions and coming up with new answers while they're out there. And this is the strange thing about, attitudes as opposed to facts, as opposed to questions of raw, innate intelligence, as opposed to questions of the capacity to learn. I'll always remember that I got off a bus in Luang Prabang, northern Laos, and there was a young American woman who was there as a tourist alone. She was a single female tourist. And she had just overheard the conversation I was having with my girlfriend at the time. This was a long-term girlfriend. She was a Canadian like myself. She wasn't a Lao person. But on the bus, I was talking to my girlfriend about history and politics of Laos, the history of that area and what have you. And so for whatever reason, this American tourist, her ears pricked up and she got interested. She said, "Oh, look, do you mind if I talk with you?" As we got off the bus, "Do you mind if I go along with you?" Because she wanted to learn more about this place she had bought a very expensive airplane ticket to visit and that she knew nothing about. So immediately after getting off the bus, we did something that at that time was very common for tourists to do. We walked up the little mountain that's in the middle of the city of Luang Prabang. It's really a hill. People call it a mountain, whatever. We walked up to the top of it, and at that time, there was the rotating bracket for a large anti-aircraft gun, a machine gun used to shoot down aircrafts. I knew it was going to be there before I got there, so I wasn't shocked to see it. And I knew, of course, the history of the wars of the area. So when we got to this thing, and we did, while walking up, me and my girlfriend and the stranger were talking about politics and history of the area. And the tourist had questions, my girlfriend had questions, and I had answers and whatever. It was a very unequal conversation. It wasn't like there were all three people had that kind of background. So I was doing most of the answering, and the two women were asking most of the questions. And we got to the top, and my girlfriend, who knew to expect to see this also, she said something, "Oh, there it is. Oh, yeah, and I just said, "Oh, yeah, right." And this tourist had no idea what this sort of strange machine was, the strange contraption. I don't know if it's still there, by the way. It may be still there. It may be that the government decided to remove it at long last. And I said, "Yeah, it's a Russian anti-aircraft bracket. It's a rotating bracket for a giant Russian-made machine gun." As I recall, I may be misremembered, there were a few stamped-in letters, tooled-in letters into the metal that still reflected the fact that it was Russian, of Russian origin. It's a distant memory now. And this American tourist was completely shocked and astounded. And she asked, "What do you mean? Why would the Russians have built a military installation here? Whose airplanes were they shooting at?" And I looked at her and I said, "Do you not know that your country, the United States of America, dropped more bombs on this country, on Laos, than they dropped on Germany in the whole of World War II? Do you not know that Laos is either the most heavily bombed country in the history of the world, or at least in the top three?" And now those are debated statistics. The amount of munitions dropped on Laos is absolutely unbelievable. And when you look into details, it's very hard to calculate because the United States operated so many legally separate covert air forces, primarily out of East Sand, Thailand. Other bombs were dropped by airplanes coming from the ocean, flying over Vietnam. But it's not the case that you can just add up the bombs dropped by one air force. There were many, many, many different air forces, legally and jurisdictionally. All of them, of course, under the American umbrella. Bombing the hell out of this incredibly poor, remote country that was not a threat to anyone. It was not even a threat to Thailand, which is right next door. So, I walked up the hill with this girl. Obviously, we had this very memorable moment at the top of the hill by this giant machine gun bracket. And then we at least continued talking as we walked down the hill. And I think we parted ways with her at a cafe or something. Cafe or restaurant. Went off to some vegetarian restaurant or what have you. Doesn't matter. She didn't learn anything from what I told her. At that time, I had all kinds of facts memorized. I knew right now this is from memory, but I don't remember. I knew about how many bombs. I knew what year the bombing started and when it stopped. And I knew about, the French presence and the American presence, the whole history. What was all fresh in my mind. I probably knew the dates of, a lot of the legal agreements surrounding the war and all kinds of stuff. Doesn't matter. And, I'm not saying I burdened her with that stuff, but, at that time, the depth and variety of facts I had at my disposal was tremendous. But she did not have an attitude of wanting to know, of wanting to learn, of wanting to get out of that experience anything. I don't even know. She probably had some idea of Lao culture in the same kind of shallow way that tourists who go to Hawaii often have a shallow idea about indigenous Hawaiian culture, like literally, women dancing in revealing attire. Like what she came there to see, what she expected Lao culture to be, or why she ever went to Laos is hard for me to guess. But obviously it had nothing to do with the political reality of what that country was at that time. It had nothing to do with the fact that the United States had a budget in the millions or billions that totally reshaped the history and fate of that culture, that country, the culture of what it is today, etc. The people who choose to go to Thailand now and to completely ignore that it's a military dictatorship, it's a military dictatorship that destroyed a system of elected democracy. People who go to Laos and have no interest in the fact that it's a communist dictatorship. The problem is not access to facts. The problem is not even knowing or not knowing facts. The problem is a matter of attitude that, it's not within my power to change. And it's very difficult, both philosophically and practically, once you get into questioning what it is that changes people or that allows people to make that kind of change. Why is it that two different guys can do exactly the same gig of humanitarian work, and one of them sees the social problems and another doesn't? The other's just totally blind to it. One of them learns so much about that place, learns so much about himself, changes as a person, and has deep and meaningful connections with other people in that locale that change them. And for someone else, it's just a job, and they feel none of that. And, obviously they may do things to amuse themselves. They may go swimming or enjoy themselves, what have you. I mean, really living in the field, you see that again and again and again. And even though it may seem banal by contrast to the humanitarian work, or contrast to learning the languages, because the process of learning language can really change you. It can change you in ways you don't even anticipate. Just being on a university campus, just taking the same course, naturally, I can sit through lectures and it has a totally different meaning for me than it has for the person sitting next to me. And for some people, it's nothing. And for some people, it's deeply emotionally effective. I had one course, we were talking about massacres that took place in China, and down to some details, where it's not just that people killed each other, acts of cannibalism, acts of revenge, gruesome, brutal human reality that were little facets of, communist revolution, communal violence in China. And, there were points at which the only people who were getting emotionally choked up or emotionally involved were me and the professor, And I noticed that. I mean, it's possible there was someone at the back of the class, but I doubt it. It was a small classroom, and by that point in the course, I knew most of the students. And there are students who are sitting there checking their Facebook on their mobile phone who just don't give a damn. And, there are students in the middle who are kind of, this is mildly interesting for them, but they'd rather be at home watching reruns of Seinfeld on TV or something. There's a range there. But what is that? What is the difference in attitude between me and another student in that class that makes me take that seriously and leads me to learn something much more than mere facts? And, obviously in that case, that professor, some professors don't care, but that particular professor for that course, he really did care. He really was connected to that history in a way that's much more than factual. I made this video partly because I have always, since the start of my channel, I have always received email from people who themselves are in Thailand or somewhere on that spectrum, living something like the permanent vacation lifestyle. I have always received email from people asking me for advice about what they should do to lead a more meaningful life, given that they're already in Thailand, or given that they've already bought their airplane ticket or planned their 6 months or their 1 year in Southeast Asia. I get messages from people who I don't know asking me, how can they be a better person? And it's not fake. That's the realest thing there is. and you think about the kind of humility and poise and self-discipline, what process brought them to write me that email? Today in the 21st century, how many people ever talk to a priest that way? How many people ever talk to a religious leader and ask that kind of question? Like, what do you think I should do to be a better person given these circumstances? And a lot of them are hoping I'll write back saying, here's a humanitarian project you can volunteer for, here's a library you can go to, here's a course you can sign up for. Whether they may be thinking about a language course, they may be thinking about a meditation course, or a Buddhist monastery that has a course on Buddhist philosophy. They may be thinking about some other experience. They may be thinking about going kayaking. I mean, come on, let's be real. They may be hoping I give them something more entertaining to do. But sure, some of those people want to roll up their sleeves and wash the feet of the poor, or roll up their pant legs and get out in a rice field and see what it's like to plant rice on a farm in third world conditions. Let me tell you, if you do it barefoot, there are leeches. Depends where you can get leeches on your ankles working in those fields, and you get used to it too. Anyway, but the truth is, I mean, I find it very, very hard to give advice to people where I don't know them. I don't mean that in a profound and personal sense, but where I don't know their attitudes. I don't know what attitudes they're bringing to the game, because those attitudes will really profoundly shape their experience, and it will preclude them from learning some things, and it will even preclude them from perceiving some things. What problems they see, what problems they seek to solve, and what kind of a process they go through as they change as individuals and as they seek to change the world and make the world a better place. That is just a very, very tough call by email over the internet if I don't really know you. So that's where I'm going to wrap up this video. All you people who've written to me, I don't know how many of you are still with my channel or still watching it over the years. I appreciate, those questions you've sent me. They're the realest questions in the world. But that's the realest answer I can give. There are just so many people, where literally, there's no way. There's no way I can recommend that you repeat the mistakes I made in life. And there's no way I can recommend that you even do the things that I thought were wonderful or meaning in my life. Because I don't know you.